South Africa is calling for leaders who can share, develop and create the change that they want to see, but people seldom know exactly which qualities their leaders should have. A standard for leadership journey is going to start this month to create a framework with a clear standard on what is acceptable and what is unacceptable leadership behavior. And joining us to tell us more is Mr. Marius Meyer, who is Chief Executive Officer of the SA Board for People Practices. Mr. Meyer, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Rowena.
So, before we talk about what is acceptable and unacceptable, why can't we agree on what makes a good leader?
I think the problem is people have got many different perceptions of what leadership really is and what a good leader should be doing. And depending on where you're coming from and what you see in a good leader, you would have your own view of what good leadership is all about. But that, for us, is exactly what the problem is, in the inconsistency in leadership behavior. And this is the reason why this initiative was started, for people to get a common understanding what is good leadership, so that we only get good leaders in leadership positions. So
what is good leadership? What is your definition of good leadership?
Well, I think what's important for me is to be able to first of all develop a clear picture of what good leadership is all about. And I think there's good examples of leaders in terms of inspiration, motivation, ethics, showing a clear direction. So the whole idea is for us to be able to say we need leaders who can take organizations forward. And that is the area where I think a lot of work is needed for people to have a common understanding of what good leadership is all about.
And does leadership differ depending on what sector or sphere you're operating in?
I think there are certain unique contextual issues depending on where you are. Surely something like safety would be more important for a mine than perhaps for a bank. But ultimately, I think good leadership, there are certain principles and practices that we need, irrespective of where you are. And that's the reason why this particular initiative has been started to say, what is a good leader? Whether you work in a bank or mine, a municipality, that there's a clear framework of how leaders should behave in order to be classified as a good leader.
Do you have an idea of what that framework is, that standard framework is, and what would inspire such a framework?
What would inspire the framework is for leaders to have a common understanding, because I think the reality, what we're currently facing is in certain fields, let's say marketing, it's very clear what a marketing manager has to do from a marketing perspective. But it's not necessarily clear what the marketing manager has to do from a leadership perspective. So the draft framework that we have developed, really focusing on starting with a very clear leadership philosophy, in other words, what leaders believe will be good for the organization and their followers, and from that start to develop a clear perspective on the type of values that leaders should instill in the organization, and then the products and services that you're going to deliver. So I think those are the typical issues that we want to highlight as part of a leadership framework for the country, so that we can get a level of consistency across different sectors, industries, and levels, depending on whether you're top of the organization or whether you're a middle manager or lower level leader in the organization.
And what about the public sphere? Well, what about government and political leaders? Does the same framework or standard framework also refer to them?
Definitely, Rowena. What we're doing is by unpacking leadership, and we are. At the end of the day, we would like to see a situation, whether you manage a branch of a shop, or whether you manage a municipality or the government for that matter, that if there's a clear standard of leadership, we can expect people to behave and to lead according to the standard. So the three major types of organizations we've identified is exactly what you say now, is government. I think government is a key leadership stakeholder. Then, of course, there is the private sector. But I think a third sector, and this sector is growing in importance in South Africa, is your non-profit organizations. Even there, you need good leaders who can commit to a cause, and then ensure that the organization is run effectively, so that you also have active citizenship in society to ensure that all the different stakeholders work together to ensure that the goals of the country is also advanced over the long term.
Absolutely. So, and the big question there is how you get leaders to commit to whatever framework.
Exactly. But that is I think the current reality is some leaders are very well educated in leadership, so they go to business school and they do get very good theoretical training. But even there, we pick up inconsistencies between different business schools also, depending on what their background and philosophy is. But then you also get leaders being appointed without any qualifications. And I think that is part of the problem. So the goal with this National Leadership Standard Initiative is to ensure that if we create this framework that will be written by the leaders themselves, so in other words, we don't want to impose and say, here's one model, there's the 5 principles. We rather want to say, let's get these stakeholders around the table and then we define in very clear terms what is good leadership and what do we as society expect from good leadership.
And what does having a conversation of this nature do? Does it dispel the myth that leaders are born? That's it. That it's innate within them.
Yes, I think so. I mean, the reality is all leaders are born, but all people are also born. So it's a matter of, yes, surely certain people will have certain characteristics that will really help them to become good leaders. But the reality is, and this is why we also call this a leadership journey, is you grow as you go on. And if you are 20-year-old, maybe you're a youth leader at school or in society or in your community, you've got another 50, 60 years of leadership. And you need to develop as a leader continuously. Even if you walk out with your MBA at age 35, what about your next 35 years or 40 years? So there's a absolute clear framework for the leader to continuously develop along that journey, because leaders do make mistakes. We're all human. And there's a lot of stress and uncertainty in the external environment that leaders need to cope with, first as individuals, and then get your team members to also to excel on their job despite the difficult economic environment around us.
And you have highlighted some tenets that good leaders should ascribe to. For instance, you mention issues of vision, that a leader has to have a vision, ethics, governance, responsibility, accountability, purpose, trust, decision-making, and good influence. All of those are going to be included in this standard. So tell us how you have formed the people to be part of this. I mean, who is going to be part of this meeting or this conference?
Okay, we have invited people to nominate themselves. So it's an absolute open invitation to business leaders, government leaders, NPO leaders to come to these platforms where they can position it. So in essence, it's an open invitation to the market for people to say, but we believe in leadership. We believe our organizations can be more effective if we improve on the quality of leadership. So the first day that we plan is just to generate the standards. So as part of that, there will be different working groups where the leaders will generate the standards. After that, there will be a period of 6 weeks where we will continue to consult with the market to get their inputs. And then by the end of October, we will then launch the formal standard after we've managed to incorporate all the inputs from people who could not even be at the first session.
All right. And this is across all sectors, like I asked earlier, both, in business, economics, and social areas, as well as government.
Absolutely. So it is inclusive. It does not matter whether you work for a minor municipality or for a hospital, for that matter. At the end, all these institutions depend on good leadership.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think if these stakeholders come together, and it's also a matter of learning from another, because we do have very good pockets of excellence in this country. There's some fantastic companies that have achieved success because of good leadership. And those good successes, we would like that to be replicated so that other companies and other leaders can learn from that and almost share these best practices in terms of what is really working for leadership. And then what are the failures, the leadership failures that we have to avoid? Because we see that around us on a daily basis where organizations are failing because of poor leadership.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, once the standard and the standard framework has been established, then what? What sort of support is there for these leaders?
Yes. Okay. Once the standards are available, what we're going to also develop as part of that process is, first of all, a leadership pledge, because we want leaders to commit to the standard. And part of that pledge, and I don't want to prescribe now how the pledge will look because that will happen during this process, but at this stage, the vision is once people have signed the pledge, you commit for the rest of your life to continue developing, first of all, yourself, but then also to almost replicate yourself and multiply yourself by developing other leaders. Because the reality is people move on, people move between organizations, and you need successors. As we're talking here today, only 12% of companies in South Africa have got succession plans. So the majority of companies don't have succession plans. And those are some of the things we would like leaders to commit to. And then we will ask training providers and the business schools to come, and the universities also, to come to the table and say, but what can we do to support this initiative to ensure that South Africa becomes so successful that all our institutions function effectively based on good leadership.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for chatting to us, Mr. Marius Meyer, Chief Executive Officer of the SA Board for People Practices, and talking about this national leadership standard that is to be launched in October, and it's meant to develop and guide South African leaders. It's now 11:45.